Happy Monday. Nice to see you guys. Let's start seated. I think seated, standard seat, comfy, supportive. Just really feeling like you're landing here. Like the seat you've found is taking care of you. Ah, so nice to have you. Eyes closed if that feels appropriate. And just feeling into your breath and noticing if there would be any benefit to shifting or adjusting the way that your breath is flowing in and out of your body. Maybe you play with two or three tempos, eventually just settling into something that soothes you. And we'll give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And if the eyes are closed, let's allow them to softly open. And let's transition straight to hands and knees tabletop. Setting up your base position, splaying those fingers out nice and wide, really connecting into the handprint energy, feeling your back neutralized, feeling the core engage. Let's take a moment to curl our toes underneath us and feel the toes splay out. So you feel a little bit of strength in your feet before we even activate. And then let's roll back, touchdown dog, just get the depth and then come back down to hands and knees, tabletop, flip the tops of the feet, and sink back into child's pose. As you land in this child's pose, note here how the compression in the hips feel, how the entirety of the spinal column is responding, right? We have it in this little tiny flexion. See if your shoulders are collapsing down and see if you can broaden out just a little bit more. See if you can feel back into that tempo that was most soothing for you in your initial seat. And then let's slide the hands in front of us if they're not already there. We'll inhale, pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Get those fingerprints rooted down. Curl the toes underneath you again. Feel that toe action so that the feet are active. And then let's roll back and into down dog. As we get back into this down dog, really think about creating that length. Really feel into that opportunity to distance from the hands. And then let's come back down to hands and knees, tabletop. We'll flip the tops of the feet and sink back into child's pose. And as you land in this second version of child's pose, note the compression in the hips. Feel how the spine is setting and responding to this little bit of flexion. Note the shoulders and the collarbones. Feel into the tempo of your breath. And then let's slide our hands in front of us. We'll inhale, pull ourselves forward to hands and knees, tabletop. Once again, toes curl underneath us. Feel the feet activate before you move. And then when you're ready, roll yourself back into down dog. This time in your down dog, get all the way back into your depth and then start to sway the tailbone. And as the tailbone's swaying, think about getting further and further into the shape. Don't think about adjusting the positioning of the hands. Keep the hands where they are. Just let the tailbone guide you into further depth. And then let's walk our way to the front of the mat. And we'll settle into our fold. And as you settle into that fold, see if you can feel the length that you created in that last version of down dog. And then drift your awareness to your sacrum. And let's slowly roll ourselves up into mountain. In your mountain pose. Let's bring our hands together, heart center. Think about finding that mid-body kind of neutrality. Think about feeling the glutes and the core equally compensate and engage. And then keep that core compensation as you interlace the fingers and push the palms out away from you. Now, because we're going palms away from us, that doesn't mean you need to go full extension, right? So if that doesn't feel good for the shoulders, just go wherever the shoulders are capable of pressing. And then draw your belly button back towards the spine. And then with the belly button back, let's just lift our arms up. Again, this is what's okay for the shoulders. So if you have the elbows bent, maybe we're only here. If we're fully extended, we're here. Maybe we're only here, though. We're just listening to the shoulders. So heading up towards shoulder capacity. And then relax the hands back to heart center. And sink your seat back into chair. And we want to, again, feel that anterior, posterior neutrality. Get the glutes engaged in the shape. And then let's lift ourselves back up. We'll sweep the arms up and overhead and exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands and walk back into down dog. And then let's come down to hands and knees, tabletop, flip the tops of the feet, and sink back into child's pose. This next landing, this current landing, another opportunity to run through all of the checks. How the hips feel, how the spine feels, how the breath feels, how the shoulders feel in this shape. And we'll give ourselves just 20 more seconds here. And when you're ready, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And then from hands and knees tabletop, we're going to set up our base position. Let's curl our toes underneath us so that you have the active feet once again. And then we're going to bring the left knee towards the left elbow. So we get a little bit of a retraction there. And then think about lifting that left knee out and then rolling it back and then tucking it back underneath and pulling it through to that left elbow. So out, rolling it back, bottom of the foot points towards the ceiling, drawing that knee into the elbow. And one more time, out as high as we can, rolling it back, and then drawing that knee into the elbow. Ground the knee, find tabletop, feel the left foot, right foot activation. Feel the variance in the leg capacity already, right? All we've done is 3 little rotations with the hips, and now we have that variance all the way down to the feet. Try to balance the energy of the feet. Roll yourself back into down dog. And then come back down to hands and knees tabletop. We'll once again flip the tops of the feet and sink back into child's pose. So we're just going to be a transition here, just a little reset so that we enter into side 2 in the way we entered into side 1. When you're ready, we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, we'll activate the feet. And with the feet active, the right knee is coming into the right elbow, and then lifting out nice and wide, rolling back so that the bottom of the foot can point towards the ceiling space, and then drawing that right knee in. Out wide, rolling it back, and then drawing it in. And one more time, out nice and wide, rolling it back, and drawing that into the elbow. Ground, curl your toes or keep the toes curled and roll back into down dog. Weird little bit of space here, right? We have a lot of like capacity at the hip capsule itself, but the rest of the body is still pretty rigid. Think about bending the knees. And as you bend the knees, maybe even more than you normally would, feel the space you can get into the hips. Like the glutes are just sailing back into all of this kind of unexplored space. And then eventually let's just walk ourselves forward to the front of the mat. And we will inhale into half lift. And then exhale back into fold. As you land in this fold, let's slide our hands behind us and then slide the hands up the backside of the legs and let the hands interlace, resting on the sacrum. And then with the hands resting on the sacrum, so the shoulders are relatively loose here. Inhale yourself to half lift. Notice how much harder that is just with the hands behind us. And then exhale back into fold. And notice how much more space you have just with the hands behind us. And then inhale into half lift. Feel the shoulder activation as you get into this half lifted space. And then exhale back into fold. Drop your hands, drift your awareness to your sacrum, and let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Inhaling our hands together. Heart center. Let the fingers interlace and give yourself like a little bit more pressure. Like not only are we interlacing, but we're squeezing the hands. Not like white knuckling, but just a little bit of extra pressure. And then with that little bit of extra pressure, just take your elbows up to shoulder height. So hands end up roughly forehead height, right? A little bit depending upon our geometry. And then we're going to sink back into chair. Trying to keep those elbows at shoulder height so that we feel some of this lateral pull. And the more kind of hand engagement, the more challenging the hold is. And then we'll lift ourselves back up, release the arms, and exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands, walk yourself into plank. And then from plank, let's slowly, gently, delicately lower ourselves straight down to our belly. So we end up with our hands right underneath our shoulders, the tops of the feet pressing into the mat. So think about glutes engaged, quads engaged, kneecaps are lifted, tops of the feet are active. Feet are active here. And then just take your fingers and pull your forehead out towards the top of the mat. Now, if you want to separate your forehead from the mat, maybe an eighth of an inch, let's say, maybe even less, fine. But really think about fingertips pulling your forehead forward, top of the head forward, pulling the head forward. And see if you can feel the space around your sacrum getting true traction, right? Really feel the sacrum getting that alleviation of the pressure as we just pull ourselves forward with the tops of the feet anchored. Tops of the feet have to be anchored to get that middle body expansion. And then relax. Let your hand slide underneath your forehead for a little crocodile pose. And let your body be as at ease as you can comfortably get here. So there were these two twins that were born, and due to some egregious errors at the hospital, the daughter was sent home with the wrong family. And the doctors, of course, the hospital staff, of course, had a very hard time explaining to this family what happened to their daughter, the second half of their twins, but they left with a single child. And they went home, and that child was raised by two scientists. And these two scientists had had twins, and they brought home a single child, a son. And they raised him with a very detailed approach to education from a very young age. And it benefited him. He was very early on recognized for being intellectually ahead of his peers. Let's give ourselves just 10 more seconds here. Just last breath or maybe two of really settling in. And then let's slide our hands underneath our shoulders. And we'll press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, let's curl the toes, lift the seats, and roll back into down dog. And feel into the depth of your down dog. And then let's step our right foot forward in between the hands. And we'll sweep up into crescent, just a little traditional crescent, just kind of feeling into how the body is responding to standing shapes tonight. And then float your hands back down to the mat. And we'll step the right foot back into down dog. Get all the way back into your depth. And then our left foot will step forward. We'll land, we'll settle, we'll sweep ourselves up into crescent side two. Again, just checking in on how our body is feeling in the standing shapes. And then float the hands down and step your left foot back and into down dog. Get that down dog depth, create that space, really think about how much room you can maximize there into the tailbone, and then slide your right foot just behind the heel of your left hand. So we cross the right foot over our mat, and now we have a crisscrossed leg position. And we are going to plant our right hand right in the middle of the mat. And then take your left hand to your hip, and then see if it's possible to roll open to this little exaggerated side angle. And then left hand comes down. Keep the right foot where it is. Splay the toes out nice and wide. We have a crisscross leg pattern, but it's not an exaggerated crisscross, right? The left foot is maybe just slightly to the right of the right foot, and then sweep your arms up into this little staggered crescent, and then float the hands back down. And we'll step the right foot back to its traditional place on the mat. Let your hips receive that asymmetry and balance back out. And then let's do the same thing to the second side. So the left foot slides up just behind the right hand. There's just a subtle little cross here. And then the left hand comes right to the middle of the mat, right hand to the hip, and we roll open to this little side angle. The rotation here is a little bit easier, right? Because we have this exaggerated front foot. And then we plant, splay the toes out, and sweep yourself up into this little crisscross version of crescent. Just getting those hips a little bit extra challenge. Drop the hands down, step the left foot back to its side of the mat. All the room in the world for the hips right now. Really sink back into that space. Feel the tailbone exploring the depth. And let's walk our way to the front of the mat. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Drop. Yeah, nice skip drop. Nice, Lisa. Heck yes. Beautiful folds. Just love seeing the depth here. And then drift your awareness to your sacrum. And let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. We'll come back into our mountain pose. Hands finding their way to heart center. Breath nice and fluid. Hips nice and open. And let's take our left ankle and we'll just cross that over the right thigh. A little balance, something we haven't done in too long on here. So we create this stable space. And then your choice. You can extend the arms out in front of you. This probably makes it a little bit easier. You can keep the hands at heart center, pressurizing. And we're going to sink into a little chair. So we get that seat back. We have the arms forward. We can kind of use them as little tightrope pieces. And then we'll rise back up and just release that right foot, or that left foot, excuse me, so that it mirrors the left, so that it mirrors the right. And we breathe. And then when it feels appropriate, kind of settling back into that hip space, let's take our right ankle and we'll cross that over the left. And we set that space, and then we're going to sink back into our chair. A lot of room in the hips here. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're balanced, but we do have that space to kind of get into if we're balanced enough. When you feel like you're balanced left to right, when you feel like you've had enough, we'll rise back up. Release the feet. Relax the glutes first so that you feel the hips kind of settle. Then engage the glutes and engage the quads. Keep that leg engagement and take your hands right to your belt line. And then we're going to use that to help tilt ourselves forward to half fold. So we have legs, quads, glutes engaged, and we have this nice extension. Now I want you to think about lowering into your fold like a millimeter at a time so that you can actually feel the musculature kind of releasing the vertebrae as they get into their full depth. And then eventually your fold is complete. Hands can release if they haven't already.
And let's grab opposite elbows and rock a little side to side.
Really looking to use the gravity, that gravitational force, to build traction and length and space between the vertebrae themselves. And then the next time that you cross center, let's pause there. And we'll plant our hands and walk ourselves back into down dog. And let's sail our right foot straight back and behind us. And then bring your right knee to your right elbow. And then extend that right foot straight back and behind you. Push down into the finger mounds and reach those toes. And then step your right foot forward and into lunge. Ground your left heel and let your left hand roll you up into warrior two. Ooh, settle here. Think about the space we have in our hips. And don't let that right leg collapse in. Really stay with the width here. And then spin your left heel up. We'll find crescent. Slide back into your right hamstring, just enough to feel the hamstring activate. And then rebend the right knee for crescent, float the hands down on the mat. Step your right foot back into down dog. Left leg straight back and behind you. Left knee to left elbow. Left foot extends straight back. And then step that left foot forward. Right heel grounds, right hand takes us up into two. Big, wide, lateral edge awareness, depth in the hips. Settling into your space. Eventually, right heel spins up, crescent. Left hamstring slides back. As you do that, that right leg also kind of energizes back, so you get more of that calf. The back leg gets more of the calf activation. And then left knee bends, crescent, hands drop. We'll step the left foot back into down dog. Come down to hands and knees, tabletop, flip the tops of the feet, and sink back into child's pose. And really think about landing here. Like you are looking to explore the capacity of your hips. And really think about that hip capacity and how each exhale breath is this opportunity to settle in. To sink in, to melt into the space you've created. Let's give ourselves just about 20 more seconds here. So eventually, this young boy grows up and he becomes a scientist just like his parents. When you're right, when you're ready, let's slide our hands forward. We'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees, tabletop, curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. And from down dog, let's once again sway the hips a little bit. And then let's walk our way forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Feel the back musculature turn on. And exhale back into fold. Drift your awareness to your sacrum, and let's roll or sweep ourselves up into mountain, hands at heart center. When you land at your mountain space, sink right back into chair. And then as we come up out of chair, let's come up onto our toe mount so the heels lift. So we get that little bit of a balance. And then let's stay on our heel lift as we sink our seat back into chair. Good core activation. Drop the heels, push the hamstrings back, and slowly lower yourselves down into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Slide your right foot straight back into lunge. Take your right hand and plant that right underneath the right shoulder. Find that nice vertical alignment for your tibia and fibula and take the left hand up into a big, beautiful twist. Maybe we even gaze up towards those left fingertips if it feels okay for the neck, head, and shoulder. And then left hand comes down. Slide your right foot straight forward so that it mirrors the left. And inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Left foot slides straight back. Think about getting that front shin nice and vertical. Left hand plants right underneath the shoulder. Right hand reaches up into the twist. Good activation in that back quad. Maybe we gaze up if it's okay for the neck, head, and shoulder. And then right hand comes down. And we slide the left foot forward so that it mirrors the right. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Roll or sweep back into mountain. And exhale your hands to heart center. Sink your seat right back into chair. Get some nice depth here. Really feel the space you have made available. And then rise back up. Take those hands like we did at the beginning of class, interlace and push forward. So whatever is available here again, shoulders are still guiding the way. And then we're going to lift up, shoulders still guiding the way. So elbows can be bent all the way. The lift could be just to the below the chin, but we're just coming upwards. And then we are going to keep this as we exhale through forward fold. Release the hands at the bottom of your fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold and slide your left foot straight back and into lunge. Plant the left hand right underneath the left shoulder. Ground the left heel. And with the left heel grounded and the left hand planted, take your right hand up into the twist. It's a much more lumbar requirement in the rotation. If it doesn't feel possible, bring that heel back up. And then right hand comes back down. And right hand comes to the medial edge, big toe edge of the right foot. Left hand opens into a really full side angle. A lot of space here. Maybe we even extend that left arm towards the front of the room. Left heel lifts up, left hand comes down. Slide your left foot forward so that it mirrors the right. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Slide your right foot straight back and into lunge. Ground your right heel, plant your right hand so it's right underneath the shoulder, and then the left hand rolls into this twist. Kind of like a revolve triangle prep, right? but it's a huge ask of the lumbar. And then left hand comes down, left hand comes to the big toe edge, medial edge, right hand lifts into side angle. Right hand comes down, left hand to its side of the mat, right foot slides forward to mirror the left. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Really drop into that space. Yes. Nice, nice, Stephanie. Feel the middle back relax. Plant your hands and let's walk our way into plank. Little core squeeze, little glute squeeze. Slowly, gently, delicately lower yourself down to your belly. Hands stay right underneath the shoulders. We're going to do the exact same thing we did the last time we were here. Quads flex, glutes flex, tops of the feet are active and anchoring. And then we're pulling from the fingertips like we're trying to reach the head forward. And we want to feel this mid-trunk get like the tension's just being released from it. And it can be a pretty unique sensation. That middle body very rarely gets the tension released from it. And then eventually, we'll just relax. Slide our hands underneath our forehead for a little crocodile pose. On the other hand, the second half of the twins, this little girl, she ended up kind of going from house to house. And she was eventually dumped at a monastery and raised by monks. And she became an integral part of their community. And they have this tradition at this particular monastery where when a monk reaches a certain age, they're sent off to go be kind of a spiritual guide for a little town or village. And whether the monks at this monastery knew it or not is unclear, but they sent this young woman to be in the same little town as her twin brother. And the two, never knowing that the other existed, let's give ourselves just 20 more seconds here. And so these two siblings, these two twin siblings, end up kind of rising to prominence through their own separate paths within this own separate town. And in some ways, they kind of rival one another. They don't really have a relationship. They don't really know each other, but they both are, their insights are sought by members of the community. When you're right, when you're ready, we will slide our hands back underneath our shoulders, press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, let's extend our legs out in front of us so we can briefly touch staff, just long enough to kind of make sure our spine is vertical, or our 90-degree bend in the mid-body space is as 90 degree as we can make it, and then follow that forward into a seated fold. And so the twin brother garners most of the attention, right? He is this sought after academic, and he uses scientific principles and practices to solve what seems like every important problem within the community. On the other hand, the twin sister, she's more sought after about matters of the heart and personal relationships and things. When people aren't feeling at ease within their family, they go to her. But both of them are exceptionally capable at what they do. And both of them make tremendous impacts with their teachings, their helpings, their offerings. Last 10 seconds here. And we will walk our way up into seat and lower ourselves onto our spine. For a moment of appreciation. Heck yes. Really allow the spine, really allow the mat to receive your spine. Spine doesn't need to do anything but be what it is right now. And we'll just give ourselves about 60 seconds here just to really settle in and appreciate this. One year, the little town, which is mostly an agricultural community, is hit by this devastating crop failure. It doesn't matter what's planted, if it's a grain or a legume or a vegetable, everything is dying. And people have different opinions about what it might be, that they got poisoned seeds, that the land has gone bad, that the air is too polluted. And so, of course, they all go to this twin brother so that he can identify the problem and solve it. When you're right, when you're ready, let's bring our knees into a bent position if they're not already. And then we are going to let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. So there's not going to be a super long space here. This is just a little bit of a reset, just to get any potential imbalance out around the sacrum. So really think about feeling an equivalent amount of distance between the lateral edge of your thighs and the ground here. And then we will bring our knees back to neutral and extend your right leg down the mat. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a different entry than we normally would do this. We're going to extend the left leg, and we want this left leg to be elevated. So maybe an inch or two of elevation. So left leg extends to kind of mirror the right, but we have it offset because the left leg is lifted. And we really think about the hips staying neutral as you do this. And then just point the left toes. And then retract that left leg and let it land. And then retract the right leg to mirror the left. And feel the asymmetry there in the hips, even though we worked so hard to keep that balanced. And then your left leg's going to extend. And your right leg is going to extend but stay lifted. So right leg now has the elevation. And then point the right toes. Try to keep the energy in the hips so that you stay balanced here. And then bend your right knee, bend your left knee to mirror, and add a little dynamic sway. Now we have created a lot of room around the hips. Oh, as you're moving, keep that in mind, be kind to your spine. If the spinal rotation just doesn't feel like it's there to match the hip capacity. Don't overdo the rotation of your hips to torture your spine. Doesn't make any sense. Be kind to your spine. Maybe 2 more times in each direction, so 4 more total movements. And then eventually just let your knees fall to one side or the other, whatever side feels most appropriate to land on first for a little static hold. And so this twin brother starts testing the things that you would test. He starts getting samples of the seeds of all of these different styles of plants. And as unlikely as it may be that every single seed was poisoned, he tests them and he doesn't find anything. And he goes out into the fields and he sees these wilted plants and he collects plant matter and he brings it back and he tests the plant matter, and there doesn't seem to be any nutritional deficiencies. And he does the same thing with the soil. And there doesn't seem to be any nutritional deficiencies there. There doesn't seem to be any toxins there. They run tests on air quality. It doesn't seem to be any different than normal standard years. When it feels appropriate, let's bring our knees back to neutral. And then we'll exhale the knees over to the second side. And so they, kind of as a collective, the community starts to panic more and more. And they call a community meeting. They get everybody together. And as everybody comes together, there are still all these little factions of people that think it's one thing or the other. And as this twin brother is trying to give his presentation to the community about all the things they've tested, every time he shows something, someone shouts out, he's showing the seeds and they're not problems, and someone shouts out, it's the air quality. It's like, no, it's not the air quality. And he goes through the air quality presentation. And eventually shows the community everything he's tested. And he says, we're kind of out of ideas. We need your help so that we can figure out what's going on. We need you to help us identify what we should be testing, what we haven't tested yet. And everything that everyone says, he's already done. And his twin sister, who he doesn't know, puts her hand up and she says, I have an idea. And he says, okay, great. What should we test? She says, it's not about testing. I need a week. And everybody's just kind of like, but they don't have any other suggestions. There's no more offers. So they don't have any other choice. She has a week. She has more than a week if she wants it. And for the next week, she goes out into these dying crop fields. And she'll touch the soil and she'll touch the plants. And she just kind of sits in the field. And the town is just losing their mind. They keep going to this twin brother, begging him to come up with a solution. And he's like, guys, we've run everything we have. If you have something I should test, let me know. When you're right, when you're ready, knees are going to come back to neutral. And we are going to ask ourselves, if there's any last final movements that would be beneficial before Shavasana. And if there are, we'll offer those to our body. And if there isn't anything that we need, let's just settle in to a shape where we can fully appreciate Shavasana. And so after a week, she calls everybody together and she says, I have the solution. When you feel right, when it feels appropriate for you, let's just settle into our version of stillness for the night. So this twin sister gathers everybody together and she says, I've found the solution to our problem here. It's not the seeds, it's not the soil, it's not the water, it's not the air quality. It's the hearts of the villagers themselves. And the audience just kind of starts jeering her and booing. But then her twin brother steps on the stage and he says, no, it's true. We've been testing this in the lab, and it turns out what the stress we have within our community is impacting our plants. It's impacting the very land that we live upon. And sure enough, as the community started to mend their differences, the land itself started to thrive once again. We'll start to move our fingers and our toes. And the brother and sister maybe never ever found out that they were related, but they became very good friends after that moment in time. Movement into our wrists and our ankles, to our elbows and our knees, our shoulders and our hips, neck, head, jaw, eyes. Eventually, the entirety of the body will move, and we'll utilize that movement to transition from the shapes we are in and return ourselves back into a seat. And whenever they would sit down for a meal or a game of cards, the brother would always joke that the intellect was all on his side of the table, but the intelligence was on her side. And letting our eyes close and inhaling our hands together at heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that our intellect is just a collection of things we've learned, seen, and remembered, while our intelligence is about the deeper interwoven connections that sometimes can only be felt, and see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. And boy, if you were here for that story yesterday, that thing came together today. I love you. Have a beautiful week. I'll be back on Sunday to recharge, and we'll do this again next Monday. Thanks for being you. Mwah.